Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Pressure is increasing on the Prime Minister to delay the date of the UK's departure from the EU. At a meeting in Egypt with Arab and EU leaders, Theresa May is still insisting the UK will leave on March the 29th. But the head of the European Council, Donald Tusk, says a potential extension has been discussed and that moving the March the 29th deadline would be a rational solution. The Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte warned Mrs May that the UK is sleepwalking into a no-deal scenario and needs to wake up. From Sharm el-Sheikh, our political editor Laura Koonsberg's report contains some flash photography.
Theresa May must be rather used to grinning and bearing it by now, waiting for the cameras to leave before yet another vital conversation. And with every day more clamour for her to say she'd wait too. The Prime Minister wants to stick to the timetable, leave the EU next month. But if MPs don't say yes to a deal before then, might she let that slip?
But what I've sensed in all of my conversations with my fellow leaders here, both here in Sharm el-Sheikh and in recent days, is a real determination to find a way through which allows the UK to leave the EU in a smooth and orderly way with a deal.
If your deal is rejected again next month, which would you choose as our Prime Minister? Leaving the European Union without a deal or delaying by a couple of months?
I'm clear that what I'm working for is to ensure that we get a deal negotiated with the European Union that addresses the concern of Parliament, such that Parliament votes for that deal and we're able to leave with a deal.
She doesn't want to answer because she knows that tension waits for her at home. But more voices abroad hold out that real possibility.
I believe that in the situation we are in, an extension would be a rational solution. But Prime Minister May still believes that she's able to avoid this scenario.
When you were trying to put your spoon in, it just threw it away.
And then suddenly everybody left.
There's more to chat about than last night's buffet. To avoid that dilemma over delay, the Prime Minister still needs EU friends to give an extra legal assurance on the controversial Irish backstop that guarantees no hard border.
Again, good morning.
But patience is obviously very thin.
We are now sleepwalking into a no-deal scenario. It's absolutely unacceptable. And I think your best friends have to warn you for that. And I think I'm one of your best friends. The Netherlands is one of your best friends. So we have to be very straightforward. Wake up. This is real. Come to a conclusion and close the deal.
And finally, do you think it's now very likely there will be a delay? And if there is a delay, how long might it be?
If Theresa May would ask for a delay, I think the EU will then ask for what do you want with it. We don't want to get into this position again and go around in circles for the next couple of months.
But she's crisscrossing countries for a reason. Number 10 believes there's still a narrow way through without hesitation, with his help. At home, though, more and more Tories, including ministers, demand in the next 48 hours that the Prime Minister at least implies she'd be willing to put the brakes on Brexit rather than leave without a deal.
It's not in anybody's interest to see no deal affecting Britain in the way that we're talking about.
But there's always a different Tory force in town. A sniff of deliberate delay, a much longer process. Eurosceptics would howl with rage.
I hear again and again from people, regardless of which side they voted, that they just wanted to get on with it, to get this sorted. A delay would prolong the uncertainty. It doesn't actually resolve things.
Here and now, and back at home tonight, the Prime Minister will do anything she can to avoid saying she would choose delay rather than leaving the EU without a deal if her compromise is rejected by MPs again. No one in government is really talking about more than a couple of months of extending their political agony. But this week, the Prime Minister's problem is acute and familiar. How can she placate her party when one half of it is noisily demanding one thing, the other screaming for the opposite?
Summits can be surreal. The Prime Minister last night found herself in an impromptu pool match with the Italian leader. With so much riding on Brexit, Theresa May simply can't afford to miss a shot. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Sharm el-Sheikh.
Well, Theresa May is flying back from Egypt tonight and will address MPs tomorrow. In the meantime, Labour have just announced some movement in their position on Brexit and look set to support another referendum. Let's talk to our political correspondent Vicky Young, who's at Westminster. Vicky, what more can you tell us?
Well, we know Jeremy Corbyn's been under huge pressure over his Brexit policy too. The policy was to push for a general election. If that doesn't happen, then to move towards another referendum. He's even had defections from his party partly driven by unhappiness over Brexit policy. The suspicion of some was that Mr Corbyn was dragging his heels over backing another referendum. Well, tonight he's gone into a meeting with his MPs in the House of Commons where he's going to say that he has shifted his position. We've been told that Labour will put forward or support an amendment in favour of a public vote. But a few words of caution here. There are a lot of unanswered questions. First of all, what would the question on the ballot paper be for this referendum? Would there be an option of staying in the EU, or would it just be a referendum on Theresa May's deal? Secondly, would it get through Parliament? Jeremy Corbyn has a split in his party too. There are dozens of Labour MPs who don't want another referendum. They think it goes against the first one. They are in Brexit supporting areas. So a lot of questions that Mr Corbyn will be answering right now.
Vicky at Westminster, thank you.
The Labour Party has tonight signalled a significant shift in its Brexit policy, moving closer towards a second referendum. Its leader, Jeremy Corbyn, wants to block what he called Theresa May's botched deal and rule out a no deal. Well, earlier the Prime Minister dismissed calls for a delay to Brexit as she attended an EU summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. She insists Britain can still leave on March the 29th. But EU Council President Donald Tusk said a delay is the only rational solution. Our political editor Robert Peston reports from Egypt.
One of the Prime Minister's last EU summits. Well, that's what she hopes. But many of her colleagues think she's naive, too optimistic of securing a Brexit deal.
Why are you so resistant to the idea of delaying the UK's exit?
A delay in this process doesn't deliver a decision in Parliament. It doesn't deliver a deal. I've had a real sense from the meetings I've had here, conversations I've had with EU leaders in recent days, a real sense that we can achieve that deal. It's within our grasp to leave with a deal on the 29th of March, and that's where all of my energies are going to be focused.
It's been a day of steamroller, Theresa May, meeting after meeting, starting at breakfast with the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, who reads the UK newspapers and asks the Prime Minister whether it's true she's considering a short Brexit delay. But this was the big one, a negotiation with the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, in which they prepared the ground for ministers and officials to draft a legal document, a codicil, that would give comfort to Tory Brexiter MPs that the so-called Northern Ireland backstop couldn't last forever. Now, the other EU leader, Donald Tusk, was also perhaps trying to be helpful, but proved he's doubtful the Prime Minister will get all she wants and needs.
Prime Minister May and I discussed yesterday a lot of issues, including the legal and procedural context of a potential extension. I believe that in the situation we are in, an extension would be a rational solution. But Prime Minister May still believes that she's able to avoid this scenario.
This is a Prime Minister now prepared to move well out of her comfort zone to win over critics, even playing pool last night with the Prime Minister of Italy. It's a game he plainly knows better than Theresa May, but that doesn't mean Theresa May can't win this match, even if the odds look very long. Robert Peston, ITV News in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
Well, here tonight, Labour announced it would support a second referendum, but it didn't give any more details. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan is at the Houses of Parliament. So, Carl, just put this into perspective. How significant is Labour's decision?
Well, this does sound like a very big move indeed from the Labour Party, although there is an awful lot around this announcement that still has to be cleared up. A second referendum may have got a little closer this evening, but what the party has actually said is that if their Brexit policy is rejected here on Wednesday, as it almost certainly will be, then they will put forward or support an amendment, a vote here, in favour of a public vote to prevent a damaging Tory Brexit. Now, just a week after a number of MPs defected from Labour, partly on this issue, this will be seen as a bid to stop more Labour MPs defecting. And tonight, a short time ago, one of those defectors from last week gave this a cautious welcome.
We'll have to look at the detail, but on the surface of it, it looks like a positive development, move in the right direction. But as I say, we'll have to look at the detail. If Labour is embracing the idea of a final say referendum, I think we would be delighted. It changes the landscape here at Westminster entirely.
Now, you heard the if there, and a number of current Labour MPs also have questions about how much of a change this will really be. The biggest question of all is what kind of referendum Labour would actually support, because they haven't said whether they would have Remain even as an option on the ballot paper. Second referendum might be closer tonight. We'll have to see.
We will indeed. Carl Dinnan, Parliament, thank you.
Delaying Brexit is now a rational solution, according to the European Council President Donald Tusk. But at the EU Arab Summit in Egypt, Theresa May said a delay was not the answer. With the time before the scheduled departure date running out, Mrs May also said it could be possible to ask Parliament to vote on the withdrawal agreement before it had been finally approved by the other EU members. But tonight, Labour is putting new pressure on the government with a further indication that they will end up backing a new public vote on Brexit. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. Gary.
Well, we all know that Jeremy Corbyn is quite capable of proclaiming a policy he is extremely proud and pleased with very loudly and clearly. If you read the statement that was put out tonight about what he's just been briefing Labour MPs on, which is a tiptoeing, a serious step, probably more than a tiptoeing, towards support for a second referendum, it's been extracted rather like a tooth. I mean, he's not proclaiming this, but I think the supporters of a second referendum are going to grab what is in this statement and what Jeremy Corbyn has said to MPs behind me there and try and nail it down to confuse the metaphors a bit and make sure that Jeremy Corbyn is now in an immovable position where he backs a second referendum. One of the MPs who was in that meeting just now, actually he's still in there texting me very kindly, said that Jeremy Corbyn reading out the support for a second referendum said that it was a bit like watching a hostage read out a ransom note. It felt like Keir, I think a reference to Keir Starmer, and Cooper, Yvette Cooper I suspect, had taken over our leadership. All of this still leaves many questions unanswered. Exactly what will be on the ballot paper, though a statement from Labour is saying Remain will be an option on a ballot paper in a second referendum, and whether Labour can actually turn around a House of Commons they don't run and make sure that they get a second referendum. There are rebels on the Labour side who will break a whip even if they're told they've got to back this, and there are probably not at the moment enough Tories to try and backfill those Labour rebels. So there's a real battle on. There are Labour supporters in Momentum who are messaging me saying that they're going to work in the grassroots and try and put pressure on MPs to make sure that they do back a second referendum. We now have a sort of schedule for where things go. Tomorrow a statement by the Prime Minister and then a vote on a series of amendments tomorrow, but the key amendment on a referendum probably comes on the 12th of March, the same day as the meaningful vote. Another extraordinary day in Sharm el-Sheikh, in Egypt, and in the corridors of Labour power.
Depending on what poll you look at, more than 70% of Labour Party members would like a second referendum. 90% of them would vote to Remain if they got the choice again. But Jeremy Corbyn has been holding out against this tide of opinion. He and some of his closest allies shared the wariness or hostility of Labour MPs representing strong pro-Leave seats. Now the Labour leadership is signalling that resistance may be crumbling. In a meeting of Labour MPs tonight, Jeremy Corbyn is saying when it comes to the vote on Theresa May's deal, now expected on March the 12th, Labour may table an amendment that demands a second referendum, putting her deal to the voters. It comes after defections from Labour to the independent group of MPs last week. All these MPs support a second referendum, and senior Labour figures wanted to give like-minded MPs a reason to stay in the party.
We'll have to look at the detail, but on the surface of it, it looks like a positive development, move in the right direction. But as I say, we'll have to look at the detail. If Labour is embracing the idea of a final say referendum, I think we would be delighted. It changes the landscape here at Westminster entirely.
Theresa May spent the morning in Sharm el-Sheikh. The Egyptian resort wasn't looking at its most welcoming for EU visiting leaders. The talks venue perhaps lacking in intimacy. But in the margins of this summit, Theresa May pressed the flesh with EU leaders and heard firsthand from the Dutch Prime Minister concern about the implications for business of a no-deal Brexit.
There's so many companies are not prepared. Just think that he was this hard Brexit.
I said he's speaking about. But we're working to make sure that we get a solution.
I know. But just in case.
Mark Rutte later said the UK was sleepwalking into no deal and needed to wake up. The German Chancellor asked Theresa May if newspaper reports claiming Number 10 had prepared a request for a 2-month postponement of Brexit were true. European Council President Donald Tusk was one of several EU figures who said delaying the date of Brexit from March 29th was common sense.
I believe that in the situation we are in, an extension would be a rational solution. But Prime Minister May still believes that she's able to avoid this scenario.
Theresa May refused to be drawn on whether she was ready to ask for that extension.
Look, an extension to Article 50, a delay in this process, doesn't deliver a decision in Parliament. It doesn't deliver a deal. We have it within our grasp. As I've just said, I've had a real sense from the meetings I've had here, conversations I've had with EU leaders in recent days, a real sense that we can achieve that deal. It's within our grasp to leave with a deal on the 29th of March.
Theresa May tomorrow has to say something stronger than that in a common statement if she's to stop ministers en masse defying her leadership. Ministers said there was hectic work behind the scenes still on exactly what the Prime Minister will say.
Well, joining me now from Westminster is the Labour MP Peter Kyle, who is proposing the amendment, which includes a second referendum. What do you understand Labour's position to be tonight? Is Labour now backing a second referendum?
It is, Christian. It's very clear now that Jeremy and the Shadow Cabinet have endorsed a policy whereby it tries to put forward again to the Commons this week our full negotiating stance, should Labour be in the position to negotiate. But it is very, very clear now that should that not be successful in the House of Commons this week, that it will move towards embracing, going back to the people in one form or another of a referendum.
Will that be in March? Will that be on March the 12th, or will your amendment go forward this week on Wednesday?
Well, the amendment I'm proposing is all about getting a decision and not a delay, if you will. What I'm trying to do, and working with Phil Wilson, the MP for Sedgefield, is we've found a way of allowing her bill and the legislation to pass through Parliament without endorsing it, but pass through Parliament so that it has a confirmatory vote amongst the population. The difference between a confirmatory vote and a full referendum is that a confirmatory vote is binding and it is based around the deal itself. So it means that it wouldn't be a never-endum, it wouldn't be the best of three. It means that once people have voted on it, then that is it, and it goes on to statute, or we remain in the status quo. But we can say to people there would be a definitive end to the Brexit nightmare.
And is that going ahead on Wednesday? That's the amendment you're submitting for this week, or are you saying that will now wait until the night of the meaningful vote?
You're quite right. This will now wait until the night of the meaningful vote, although we still don't know precisely when that will be. Don't forget, Theresa May, she keeps on chopping and changing her mind. Until just yesterday, we believed that would be this coming Wednesday, but she's moved that back. And this Wednesday will now focus on the Cooper-Bowles amendment, which is all about trying to stop no deal. Yeah. So that will be the focus of the Commons this week.
And are you talking to the leadership about the Labour official position being to back your amendment?
Of course I am, and I've been engaged actually with the leadership for quite a while now. Phil and I have met with John McDonnell many times. I'm in daily contact with Keir Starmer, who has been appointed by the Shadow Cabinet in order to work on this agreement. But most crucially of all, I'm actually talking to government ministers as well. I've been called actually from government ministers, from Tory backbenchers, right the way through to the very top of government, have been calling and asking questions about this to sound out different aspects of it, to discuss the wording of the amendment. This is a backbench amendment that has support now from the Labour front bench, and it has growing support within government itself.
Peter Carr, thank you very much indeed. Well, we can now talk to the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Emily Thornberry. Is Peter Carr right that Labour is now backing a second referendum and that will kick in from March the 12th?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try again to put forward what we think is an entirely reasonable and proper way of leaving the European Union, one that works, one that's been accepted well by experts in this country, and one which has been accepted in Europe as workable. And we have been suggesting this for 18 months, and it's what we wrote to Theresa May about.
Let's assume that's rejected.
OK, so we will try. I mean, we are going to try and get that through. So if it doesn't, then yes, we are therefore left with what Theresa May is up to. I mean, she hasn't tried to engage Parliament at all. You know, she lost her vote by 230, wasn't it? You know, the beginning of January, and she keeps asking for more time and more time and more time.
But what is your policy on the referendum?
So we think her game is my deal or no deal, and we think that her deal is disastrous. We think that no deal is disastrous. And so if that is what the choice is, then we will be asking for that to go before the public, for there to be a public vote.
And the question would be between what? Between no deal and the deal? Or would Remain be an option?
I mean, the difficulty is to a certain extent, we have to react to what it is that she does. So we're not entirely sure how this is going to play out. But what we're saying is that if we can't get our deal through, if we can't get through what we think is entirely reasonable, then anything else will be a disastrous Tory Brexit, and we would ask for the public to be able to have a vote on that.
Are you saying it's possible you could back a referendum that didn't have Remain on the list of choices?
No. So what I'm saying is that we would have a referendum on whatever deal it is that may or may not pass through Parliament, and we would be saying to the people, do you want this or do you want to remain? And so it would be like a confirmation referendum, a bit like what happened with the Good Friday Agreement. So that would be it. So there would be no Tory Brexit without there being a vote from the public.
Right. And which side of that referendum would you be on personally? Would you back the government's Brexit, or would you suggest we remain in the European Union?
Oh, listen, it's no secret. I think that it is in Britain's interest for us to remain in the European Union. I've always thought so, and I continue to think so. And so if there is a vote of that sort, I certainly will be campaigning for us to remain.
And would you be on the same side as Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah, of course.
So he will definitely campaign in a referendum, in a second referendum, to remain in the European Union. You're in no doubt about that.
If it's a choice between a disastrous Tory Brexit or no deal and remaining, then that is what we will have to do. And basically we are doing as instructed by Labour Party conference. We have gone through all the list of things that we've been asked to do. We have voted against the deal because it didn't meet our tests. We have called for a general election. We haven't succeeded at that. We've put all options on the table. We've explained to her in very clear terms what will work and what she will get a majority of Parliament to agree to. She's refusing to do that. We are trying again to put forward our solution for Brexit. And if none of those work, then if it's a choice between that and a disastrous Tory Brexit, we will be campaigning to remain, because that's all we can do.
This is extraordinary, Emily Thornberry. I mean, at the weekend, you said you would rather die than join the independent group of MPs. And here you are tonight, backing their policy. You're on the same side as you joined them.
No, I think if over the last few weeks, I at times may have seemed aggrieved at some of the people in the People's Vote, or perhaps some of the people in this new independent group who have been trying to say that we are in some way on a different page to them. It's because I've known that the discussions that we've been having have been in line with our conference policy.
But you are on the same side as them now, aren't you? I mean, you agree with them on Brexit.
Labour's policy is as Labour's policy has always been. So we have gone through the options and we are running out of time. We have 32 days between now and when we're supposed to leave. We will not allow a no deal. We will support Yvette's amendment in order to try to stop a no deal. And if she continues, and if Theresa May continues to insist on a disastrous Tory Brexit or no deal, we think that should go before the public, and that is entirely in line with our conference policy and has been since September. I'm sure you've noticed.
Now, are you sure you can carry your party, though? Because you weren't able to entirely in previous votes. There were Labour rebels. Tonight, Caroline Flint has apparently said in the meeting you've just come out of that, there's no way Labour will be able to unite around having a second referendum, especially one in which you campaign to remain. So, I mean, would you get this passed?
Well, I do make it a rule of never talking about what happens in the Parliamentary Labour Party, but it's hardly a secret that, this is a very difficult issue for everyone. And essentially, Labour represents constituencies that voted to leave and remain. We have a great mixture of views within the Labour Party. In that way, we reflect the country.
I mean, even Stephen Kinnock isn't sure about this.
And our policy has always been to try to keep the country united and to try to make sure that we move forward. That's the way that statespeople ought to behave in these circumstances, and that is what we have been trying to do.
Can I just clarify one thing? Because in that answer before, you just said if Theresa May presses ahead with a choice between her deal and no deal, then you will back the second referendum. If the Cooper Amendment is passed and no deal is effectively taken off the table for a short period.
Well, for a short period, yes.
Are you still backing the second referendum? So you're not finding a way to back out of backing a second referendum?
Listen, it's perfectly clear. We either get our policy through or anything else goes to the public. Goes to the public for a public vote. That is how it's going to work. If Yvette Cooper's amendment goes through and more time is bought, then it is a time. The challenge for the Prime Minister is to then listen to what it is that we're saying, and for us to say to her, this will work, Theresa. Nothing else will. And if she continues to insist that it's no deal or her deal, then we will find ourselves, unfortunately, at the end of the additional time that we're given, in the same position as we are now. So we need to have some sort of movement.
One of your colleagues told Gary Gibbon that Jeremy Corbyn looked like he'd been taken hostage and was reading out one of those hostage statements. Has he been sort of dragged kicking and screaming to this position?
It's so completely unfair that. People complain about bullying, and the sort of things that they say about Jeremy Corbyn are appalling. Jeremy has we have had so many of these meetings, the Brexit subcommittee, where we have been looking carefully at what we should do next, and we have been moving forward together. And it is a leadership team where we debate carefully and with respect for one another, and we come to collective decisions, and Jeremy leads that.
Emily Thornberry, thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
Now, the former Health Minister, Dan Poulter, has been awarded substantial damages by the Sunday Times after it published allegations that he had sexually assaulted 3 female colleagues. The paper claimed in 2017 that he'd put his hand up 3 MPs' skirts, but it has now accepted this was not true and has apologised to Dr. Poulter. Sunday Times had based its 2 articles on accusations made by a fellow Conservative MP, Andrew Bridgen. They were dismissed by the party's complaints panel last year.
We start tonight with that breaking news that will no doubt make uncomfortable reading for the Prime Minister tomorrow. 3 of her cabinet have penned an op-ed in the Daily Mail. Yes, another one threatening their resignation. And it's 3 completely different names. This time, Margot James, Richard Harrington and Claire Perry are putting an ultimatum to the Tory leader, telling her to make clear in her speech to Parliament tomorrow that no deal will be removed as an option after the delayed Brexit vote on March the 12th. If they don't hear what they want from her then, their resignations could come as early as Wednesday. Nick Watt is with me now. Nick, this is all broken in the last few minutes. Just tell us what they say.
That's right. I mean, it is a very significant intervention by these 3 ministers because they're basically saying that what the Prime Minister needs to do in her statement to Parliament tomorrow is say that if, when we have the meaningful vote no later than March the 12th, if that's no deal, then the Prime Minister must make clear tomorrow that she will extend Article 50. And if she doesn't do that, they say we will have no choice but to act in the national interest. What that means is resigning for what is known as to support the Cooper-Letwin amendment. That's an amendment put forward by Yvette Cooper and Oliver Letwin that would set up a mechanism to allow Article 50 to be extended. Now, all of this, the government position, is to be thrashed out at a meeting of the Cabinet tomorrow. One government source says to me, you should be selling tickets to see that for thousands of pounds. Brexit is the only item on the agenda. I spoke to one person amongst these ministers. There are said to be 15 to 20 ministers who are minded to resign if they don't get their way. One of these ministers said, They're hearing good mood music from Downing Street. Maybe there'll be enough to persuade them not to resign. I spoke to a leading Brexiteer who said they had been served notice that tomorrow there will be a very difficult message for them from the Prime Minister. Now, it's interesting, the Prime Minister flew back from Sharm el-Sheikh at about 3:30 this afternoon. I'm told that she had her speechwriter with her for today's statement, and she was wrestling with what did she do? Did she just say tomorrow, we've made huge progress with the EU, it's going well, bear with me? Or did she go further and lean into those ministers? The feeling tonight on both sides is that she's going to lean into those Remain ministers who are threatening to resign, but will it be enough to stop them?
Let's try and get some answers. We're joined by Nadeem Zahawi, Children's Minister. Good to have you here. 15 to 20 ministers is quite serious. Are they all about to resign?
Well, colleagues have to look themselves in the mirror and decide what to do. The Prime Minister and the team, the Brexit Secretary Steve Barclay, the Attorney General Geoffrey Cox are working flat out to secure a deal. The best option for our country is a deal, a good deal, which I think the Prime Minister's deal is almost there. We know what Parliament is in favour, and that is
Nadeem,
the deal with the Brady Amendment, and we know what the Parliament is also against. And I think this is a message to my Brexit colleagues. I voted for Brexit.
Just wait.
I'm a Brexiteer. Just hear me out for a second.
Your script is out of date.
No, it's
Your
not.
script is out of date because there is an editorial in the Mail tomorrow with 3 ministers telling Theresa May if she doesn't make clear that there is no deal, then they will resign as soon as Wednesday, and there may be 15 to 20 ministers behind them.
Yes.
Deal with that news.
Well, I'm going to deal with it. The Prime Minister's always said, she's been consistent by saying she will bring back a meaningful vote to Parliament. So the Prime Minister has always been clear that whatever happens, Parliament will decide. Now, we know Parliament is in favour of her deal with the Brady Amendment.
This is not about
but
the
we
March
also
vote.
know,
it's about tomorrow. It's about her speech tomorrow that she was writing on the plane, as you've heard today.
So if you hear me out,
yeah.
Parliament's against us leaving with no deal. That's also very clear. It's in favour of her deal with the Brady Amendment and against a no deal. So the message to my Brexiteer colleagues or Remain colleagues is you have to examine your conscience. You have to allow the Prime Minister to bring the deal back to Parliament because that's the best option for our country.
They've examined their conscience and they have decided that they're going to resign on Wednesday if they don't hear from her tomorrow that she is prepared to take no deal off the table if her vote doesn't go through in March. Is she going to change her script tomorrow to say that?
Well, I think she's been consistent. This is the whole point.
She has been consistent and it doesn't work, right? Because you've got up to 50 ministers about to resign. So should she be changing what she says to Parliament tomorrow? You're a Brexiteer, but you also support your Prime Minister. She's in a pickle here. What should she do? Should she delay the Brexit?
Well,
should she take no deal off the table or delay Article 50?
It's either colleagues and yourself are not listening to her or something is wrong here because she's always said whatever happens, she will bring the meaningful vote back to Parliament, which means Parliament will decide. We know that Parliament will not support a no-deal Brexit. We already know that. So my colleagues who are worried about a no deal know that it's coming back to Parliament and Parliament will not support a no-deal Brexit. But we also know that if we want to get a deal in the national interest, which is the Prime Minister's deal with the Brady Amendment, then that's what we should coalesce around. And to try and undermine her now, I think is a massive mistake.
Right. So tomorrow, is she minded to announce that she will delay Brexit if that vote doesn't get passed? Is that what she's going to say? Is that what you would recommend she say?
So if you delay Brexit, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road.
Don't tell me about delaying Brexit. Is she minded to say that tomorrow? That's what they want to hear her say. Is she minded to delay it?
I think colleagues need to get behind the Prime Minister because it's a mistake to undermine her position. The team is working flat out to get a deal. If you want the best outcome, then you support her deal and you support the Prime Minister. That is my view. That is what I recommend colleagues do. If you try and undermine her now...
though? Because who are you talking to, honestly? Because you've got 15 to 20 ministers who have already moved past that place. They've done what you suggest. They've looked themselves in the mirror. They decide they can't go along with it. They're waiting to hear her say tomorrow that she will delay that date if her vote doesn't get passed. Who are you talking to now, Nadeem?
Well, she's always, as I said to you, she's always said that she'll bring back a meaningful vote to Parliament, which means it's Parliament's decision ultimately. And to undermine
So
her
I'm
now is a
hearing she
mistake.
shouldn't say that. She shouldn't say
my view
no delay.
is we need to support the Prime Minister. Let's listen to her tomorrow. She comes back after some serious meetings she's had in Sharm el-Sheikh. Her whole team is negotiating. Michel Barnier responded today to say, actually, the alternative arrangements are being looked at, all the other options to try and satisfy Parliament. We know what Parliament's in favour of.
We know what the EU...
And that's happening now. Why would you want to destabilise that or undermine it now?
Well, we know what the EU are saying. They're saying good friends need to tell you honest things, and the honest things is this isn't going anywhere, and there are rumours that the EU might offer a delay of up to 21 months, so this would seem a shorter option. I'm just wondering, though, at what point reality kicks in, because you've already lost 3 spirited and vocal MPs, and you could lose up to 6 cabinet ministers just between the ones who've written the articles. At what point do you say, OK, we have to stop and recorrect and say...
And stop for what? So if we stop now and there is no deal...
Stop the
which we can't
process
agree...
of thought that is leading you down the same place, which is people resigning.
But if you do that, if you stop and there is no deal, all you're doing is delaying the decision rather than actually making a decision. Delay is bad for business. Every businessman or woman I've spoken to say, actually, that's no good for us. We need Parliament to come together and agree a deal.
Well, let me throw forward to the next story that we'll be covering, which is Labour's position. We don't know exactly where they stand now, but it feels as if they are pushing towards an amendment that would support a people's vote if everything else fails. Does that make things easier for the Conservatives, easier for Brexit, or worse?
Well, Labour are all over the place on this because they don't even know what the question is going to be, i.e. is it the Prime Minister's deal versus Remain? Where do they stand on this? And I hope you'll ask them that question later, as I'm sure you will. All I would say to my Brexit colleagues, and I campaigned for Brexit, and I'm a Brexiteer, and I believe it is absolutely our responsibility to deliver on the instruction of the 17.4 million people that at the moment, if we don't do that, the risk that we take as Brexiteers, as people who think it's the right thing for us to leave and have a new and positive relationship with Europe, is either a delay, which is not good for anybody, I don't believe, or no Brexit at all, which is what the people who are now campaigning for a second referendum want to, essentially, if they're truthful, if they're honest, they want to overturn the result of the referendum, which I think actually would unleash forces that none of us in politics will know where this ends up. Very dangerous place, hugely corrosive to the political process in our country.
See what Labour's...
Democracy relies on the consent of the loser. And I think if we lose that, if that no longer works, then you drive a coach and horses through the democratic process. That's a bad place for us to be. So my Brexiteer colleagues, and this is my message, as I gave my message to my Remain colleagues in government or on the backbenches, to my Brexiteer colleagues, think long and hard before you decide not to support the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, which I think she will bring back, and we will get a deal over the line. That's the right thing to do in the national interest.
The bookies seem to be less sure now that we will leave on March the 29th. Would you still put a bet on us exiting?
I think we will. I think the Prime Minister, if we just hold our nerve, will come back by the 12th of March and have a deal that Parliament can coalesce around. We know there's a majority for her deal with the Brady Amendment, and I think we can get there if we just hold our nerve.
Nadeem Zahawi, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, this also feels, as I was saying, like a rather big moment for Labour and Brexit, but you wouldn't necessarily know that from the leader's own words. It was a bit like watching a hostage perform for his kidnapper's video, the description one Labour MP gave Jeremy Corbyn's talk to his parliamentary party tonight. In the speech, Corbyn announced that he would support an amendment in favour of a public vote to prevent what he called a damaging Tory Brexit. He insisted a number of other steps would come first. Well, Nick Watt is still here. How significant does that feel to you as a move, Nick?
Oh, it is a significant move, but it's a qualified move. So what's going to happen on Wednesday is there'll be a last throw of the dice by the Labour Party to get its Brexit dream through, which is permanent membership of a customs union, a close alignment with the single market. That will not go through because it's an opposition amendment. And at that point, Labour will then say that it would support what it calls a public vote or a second referendum, either through its own amendment at a future date or by supporting another amendment. Now, crucially, a backbench amendment, crucially what they're saying is that they cannot accept in full the current amendment that's doing the rounds, promoted by the Labour MPs Phil Wilson and Peter Carr. What that does is that would allow Parliament to approve the Prime Minister's deal, but then to get it into law, you'd have to have a referendum on that versus Remain. The Labour leadership says that's got to change because they will not do anything that endorses what they call a Tory Brexit. So Emily Thornberry was saying, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, saying that in this referendum, if Labour got its way, Remain would be on the ballot. But we're not quite sure what the Brexit question would be, because they don't want to help Theresa May's Brexit, but equally their Brexit by this stage would not have got through Parliament.
Sort of ten-a-side chess once more. Is this a game changer on what happens to Brexit now, and who is currently in charge of the party's position? We'll ask Labour's front bench and one of the MPs who quit the party over Brexit in a moment. But first, a piece by James Clayton.
Jeremy Corbyn has been accused by critics of being deliberately vague on Brexit, a policy of complex ambiguity that would speak to both Brexit-facing seats and the rump of the Labour Party membership and MPs who are heavily Remain. That strategy hasn't always worked. But tonight, some clarity perhaps. There have been rumours that Jeremy Corbyn would offer explicit support for a second referendum for months. In a carefully worded statement, the Labour leader said if his Brexit plans are rejected by Parliament on Wednesday, Labour will put forward or support an amendment in favour of a public vote to prevent a damaging Tory Brexit.
She's just playing down the clock. What she wants to do is just get herself into a position whereby she says it's my deal or no deal. We think both of those are disastrous. And so we will see what it is at the end of the parliamentary process, whether we're facing no deal or a disastrous Tory Brexit, but either should go before the people, and we need to have the people to break the logjam, because this isn't supported in Parliament. This is not the way forward for our country.
But already questions about detail in tonight's Parliamentary Labour Party meeting with Mr Corbyn. What would be on the ballot paper? And if remaining in the EU was one of the options, which version of Brexit would people be given the chance to vote for?
The statement that's been made so far, there is some ambiguity to it, and it could ultimately be that Labour backs a public vote, but it's between Labour's options for Brexit and the Conservative Party's, Theresa May's Brexit deal. I don't think that would be sensible. I don't think that would be a real choice. I don't think that would be a real option for people out there.
I have always had deep reservations about the idea of having a second referendum. I think that it's going to be deeply divisive for our communities. I think it will have a corrosive impact on the role and sovereignty of Parliament, and it's also not entirely clear to me what the question on the ballot paper should be.
You've just been in the Labour PLP meeting. Was there a wide range of opinion in that meeting?
There was. A number of colleagues spoke out and welcomed the party's position on this, and a number of colleagues expressed their deep concerns. There was also a suggestion that we should perhaps be given a free vote on this issue, which I think is an interesting one, because I know that there are a number of colleagues on the front bench who have deep reservations about a second referendum, and I think there's a strong case for allowing them to express their views.
So why today's policy shift? Some point to the raft of defections last week.
I think Jeremy Corbyn has changed his position because he's trying to appease his own party. Let's not forget that his party suffered a huge split last week. There are many other Labour MPs who are threatening to leave. His base and his parliamentary party are divided on Brexit policy. And I think he's doing this in order to avoid any more Labour MPs from defecting. But I think he's also got in his calculus the fact that this probably actually won't ever have to happen. Let's see what the wording on the motion says, but I think, some 30 days before we're due to leave the European Union, it's very unlikely that we'll actually come to a second referendum.
For those campaigning to reverse Brexit, this is a chink of light. And after years of being accused of intractability, tonight is perhaps an indication that the Labour leader is willing to listen to dissenting voices in his party.
Well, joining us now, Chuka Umunna from the newly formed independent group, which has campaigned for a People's Vote, and Barry Gardiner, Shadow International Trade Minister. Welcome to you both. Barry, has anything significant happened tonight or not? We can't quite tell.
Well, I think possibly the most significant thing is that we've heard that the cabinet revolt is precipitated.
Yeah, we've done all that. Talk to us about where Labour stands tonight.
No, look, I think it is significant, and it's significant in this sense. And you will know, I've been somebody who's really resisted going to a public vote for a long time because of the damage I think it might do to democracy in this country. So you still feel that? I'm deeply concerned about that, but I'm more concerned about a no-deal Brexit. And that is what really has moved us now to the point where we say she has repeatedly run down the clock. You know, every 2 weeks she comes back and says, oh, I just need a little more time. And of course, we see this again. Look at the order paper for Wednesday. It's vacuous.
But just give me yours step by step, because people will genuinely be interested in the process now. You will try and change Theresa May's deal tomorrow for yours, and you will not expect that to happen. So then you will back the Cooper-Letwin amendment to stop no deal. And then what happens?
What the Cooper-Letwin amendment would do is it would create more time. It would extend Article 50.
Push the Article 50
and
away.
it would then give time, I would hope, for... Look, you're moving very quickly beyond the amendment that we are tabling, which is, as was pointed out earlier, that's our proposal that we think, and actually if you look at what the European Union was saying when Jeremy and others were over there last week, it's very clear that, you know, this is something that is credible.
I'm sure it's closer to the EU, but it's not going to get passed in Parliament, is it?
If it doesn't get passed in Parliament, I actually think that there are Tories who would be very happy to vote for it, were it not for the fact that it's the Labour front bench tabling it. But you're right, if it doesn't get through, then we have to move to stop no deal. And that's why we've now got to this stage, because we are, in effect, with less than 5 weeks to go, we have Parliament with a gun to its head, where she is saying it's either my deal or no deal. We're saying we've got to take no deal off the table because of the overwhelming damage it would do to people in this country, to jobs and to the economy.
It was this lot that scared you, wasn't it?
No, don't give me that. You know, nice man though he may be.
This time last week,
don't give him...
they vote with their feet, and suddenly you're back on the people's vote.
Absolutely not. Because if you look at what happened at our party conference, we laid all of this out systematically and programmatically, and you know it. What we did was we set out that, first of all, we would assess her deal. If that didn't pass muster, we would put our own forward. If we couldn't get it through, we would then argue for a general election. If we couldn't get a general election, then ultimately, if there was no other way of stopping no deal, we would move to a people's vote. That's exactly what we've done.
And do you think that Jeremy Corbyn...
give him any more credibility than that?
He can speak for himself in a moment, Chuka. I will come to you. I just want to finish on this. Does Jeremy Corbyn support the position that he spoke of tonight, even though he sounded like a hostage in a kidnapper's video, according to some of the MPs in the room?
He didn't, but actually, we had a very long, extended meeting this afternoon of the subgroup that looks at Brexit issues, and it was Jeremy who put this forward, it was Jeremy who got this drafted, and so it's absolutely with his confirmed support.
Because you will know what people are saying, that some of his close advisors are no longer in the room anymore, and that the people who have now shown their dominance in the party are the Watsons, clearly the McDonnells and the Starmers of this world, who have basically put Jeremy in this position.
No, look, sorry, I know you guys love to make it always a fight because conflict sells copy and it makes for more interest.
It was a week ago that you had MPs marching out of your party, and this is the position the Monday after.
Yes, and before that, at our party conference, we set out exactly what we would do.
That was September.
And we've done it.
Okay.
And we've done it in the order and for the reasons that were given then.
So it isn't about listening to Labour members then in the last 6 months. It's not that.
It was about listening to Labour members at our party conference because they came together with all sorts of different views. Chuka was there with his view. Other people were there with their views. And what we did was we sat down for 6 hours in a room and we all agreed. We actually got a composite motion, a motion that the whole of our party unanimously agreed. We have now systematically implemented it. God knows I wish we hadn't had to do it in this way because of her intransigence. I thought it was so ironic, I thought it was so ironic that Nadeem Zahawi sat here and said democracy depends on the losers accepting that they've lost. His government lost their deal by the largest margin in parliamentary history, 230 votes, 1,000 years of parliamentary history,
want to know...
and yet he hasn't accepted it, and neither is the Prime Minister.
OK, so where does this leave Labour's move now? How do you interpret this, Chuka?
Well, look, better late than never. I mean, there's been time wasting on an industrial scale by both front benches in the House of Commons. It's symptomatic of our broken politics, but it's welcome that the party seems to have moved in the right direction. It's a shame it took the departure of 8 Labour MPs to help nudge it over the line. But look, I'm not going to take it away from those who have stayed in the party and have sought to fight for the people to, in the end, determine this. But there's some important things to bear in mind here. First of all, Remain obviously needs to be on the ballot. Secondly, what is going to happen with regard to the 25 Labour MPs who've indicated they won't support a frontbench move to this position, even if it's whipped, because we need the whole of the Labour Party to vote for a people's vote, and we need a substantial, well, we need a good number of Conservative MPs to support it.
What are you saying to
but
those
hang on
Brexit
just
supporting Labour MPs then? I mean,
well, what I would say is this. Look, I don't think what have we seen? We've seen complete chaos in British politics. Whether you voted Leave or Remain, I don't think really many people voted for the ridiculous position that we're in now. And the fact is, actually, I mean, I spent quite a lot of time in Leave voting areas. Deliberately did so because I vote I represent a very Remain voting area. And the truth is there are a lot of Leave voters who are simply dissatisfied with what is on offer. But the key thing is really, look, time wasting. We've got no time to waste. So if the Labour Party has adopted this position, then let them come forward and support a people's vote on Wednesday when amendments can be put down. The other really important thing here is I listened to your interview with Nadim Sahawi. We really do need those ministers, and it's encouraging to see what was in the Daily Mail from these 3 ministers of state. And again, I think that's in no small measure down to 3 members of their party leaving their parliamentary party, illustrating to the Prime Minister that there's only so much of people kowtowing to the ERG, the hard right ERG in her party, that the One Nation tradition and the Tory party will put up with. But the key thing is, these guys absolutely have got to support the Cooper-Letwin amendment to stop no deal. Because wherever people are on a people's vote, I think it's absolutely right that there's a majority in the House of Commons that want to stop no deal, but we've got to give the House of Commons the legal teeth to stop that from happening. That's fundamental.
Is your group now done? I mean, is it job done? Can you rejoin Labour if they support a people's vote?
No. Look, it's welcome what we are seeing here, and if the departure of R11 has helped precipitate this, fantastic. But we are making a much bigger argument about British politics, and you've seen from the package, you've seen from the interviews today, you fundamentally have got established parties which are broken. They're divided.
You're not going to get more, are you? You're not going to. You've stemmed the flow, essentially.
Let's see. Ultimately, there are lots of people on different journeys. Now, when they reach their destination is a matter for them. But what we're clear about is when you look at what's going on at the moment, the system is broken and people need a proper alternative. And they certainly need people who put the national interest first. And that's what I would say to any of those ministers. And good for them for coming out and doing something quite extraordinary. They've talked way out of the bounds of collective responsibility. Good. But we're not there yet. We have got to make sure that this bill passes. The Cooper-Letwin bill basically will force the Prime Minister to actually deliver an extension.
And you both agree on that?
And I think we can all agree. I mean, you know, I think we can all agree on that.
Can I ask you each, do you think there will be a people's vote? Do you think we will see a second referendum?
I think it's absolutely essential that we do not simply take the Prime Minister's word for the fact that she will come back and allow Parliament to take control at the end of the day, because we've heard it before. Oh yes, she'll come back next week, she'll come back the following fortnight. She comes back, and each time she postpones it again.
Let me just cycle you around to that one.
We have to have a clear instruction from Parliament that ensures that the Cooper-Letwin amendment goes through, creates the space to take back control by Parliament.
But we've got to see on Wednesday as well. Hang on just a minute. On Wednesday, we've got to see that amendment for a people's vote. Okay. That's the key thing. We've got to see that go through on Wednesday.
Is if you can imagine a people's vote now, because I don't understand how you've reconciled in your mind since August this idea of the principle of democracy being so eroded, or listening to Emily Thornberry earlier this evening saying it's no secret she was always going to support Remain in a second referendum. It's quite confusing for a lot of us who've heard many of you think many different things.
Look, we're in a completely different context. 2 years ago, or the general election, we put forward what would have been our position had we been doing that negotiation as a government. we've now come to a point, nobody, as Chuck has said, nobody could have believed the incompetence with which she has run down the clock and imperiled our country's economic future. We're now at that point where there is a final chance for Parliament to take control of this situation and stop the gun to the head. Because actually, a no-deal Brexit would so undermine the economic fabric of this country that it too would undermine democracy in this country.
Please come in and have the last word.
Well, I mean, ultimately, this has got to be people acting in the national interest. And, I really do understand the challenges that colleagues who don't represent seats like mine face. But ultimately, I don't think anybody voted to be poorer. And so, ultimately, we've got to do the right thing by our country here. Stop no deal, refer this back to the people, given that there is complete impasse in the House of Commons, and somehow fix the broken politics in this country, because this is the worst advert for modern politics. And the problem is we've got a 20th century politics which needs to be dragged into the 21st century. And that's what we're trying to do something about.
Thank you both very much. Thanks for coming in.